Good morning, everyone. I just had to jump out of a cab and run here because there's construction outside. So I'm really even more glad that I could be with you than I would have been otherwise if we hadn't had to deal with that. So I'm the data editor at Fortune. I am the first ever data editor that Fortune has had. You probably know Fortune for the Fortune 500, the Fortune Global 500, things like that. So we've got somebody who manages that database, but we've never really had someone who was trying to take data and use that to really drive the way that we do our reporting. We are mostly just ranking companies on lists with different kinds of methodologies, some more scientific than others. So I think the best way to start is to tell you about my first day at Fortune. So the person who hired me left before I started, and luckily, someone who had been on the team that was interviewing me was walking in with the guy who was going to be my boss while I was sitting in the lobby just kind of wondering how in the world I was going to figure out what to do on my first day or find my desk. So he introduced us. I was shown to my desk. I was kind of brought around and introduced to some people. It hadn't been his idea to hire me, obviously. He had just started himself, but I want to give him credit for doing a pretty good job of like sitting down with me, trying to understand what it was I was there to do, and then back me up when I started sending out memos telling people you cannot screenshot charts from other websites and then put them on our site. And that sounds horrible, but I later found out that that was kind of a holdover from a few different things. There had been some editors, prior to when I got there who had told everyone that that was okay to do. And this was also the result of some bloggers turned reporters who kind of just treated the internet as like, carte blanche. I'm just going to grab whatever I need to, make my point and make sure that my readers understand things. And I don't know how to make a chart, but that guy has one that I like, so I'm going to put it in the story. And so if people needed a stock chart, they would go pull something up on Yahoo or Google Finance, take a screenshot, put it in the story. And so if you work for a company that we took something from, I'm very sorry. But I've worked really hard to try to scrub all that from the website because as I explained to everyone, that in most cases is not legal to do. So there I was basically a one-woman department who basically had to change the very culture of this newsroom. Like they didn't have any idea how to work with data. They didn't know how to use it appropriately. A lot of times the way data was sent to them was in a PDF and it was like a marketing kind of graphic or something. It was very pretty. It had lots of colors, and there were some numbers on the page, and so they figured, aha, this is data, and I could work with this. And they didn't really question it because they didn't know how to. So the people I was suddenly working with and coworkers with had like no literacy in data whatsoever. And the toughest part was that by me asking them to start doing things differently, I was asking them to do more work than they had already been doing. Because the faster way, obviously, was just to screenshot and embed. That takes all of 2 seconds. You go ahead and hit publish on the story, and you start moving on to the next thing that you're supposed to be working on. Because the reality of journalism now is that you've got to constantly feed the website beast. There's no way around it. And so the other thing that was kind of a challenge when I first started at Fortune was that I started in May of last year, and this was right before the Fortune 500 dropped. And so anyone who works at Fortune or has in the past can tell you that the month or two before the Fortune 500 drops is just pure madness in the newsroom because everybody's rushing around trying to get ready for like the barrage of stories we're going to publish to go with the list. And so I came in, it was maybe a week or two before this list was going to drop, and some of the editors came to me and said, we figured that you could do some charts to go with the Fortune 500, and they handed me this Excel spreadsheet. And I thought about it and I said, well, I could unleash my I'm not a graphic designer and this isn't how data journalism is supposed to work rant. Or, these are my new coworkers and I want them to understand the power of data journalism. Maybe I just do this and, I can do that rant another day. And so I wound up, spending a few late nights trying to hurry up and put together some charts and graphics to go with the Fortune 500 stories that were going to come out the day that the big list, our biggest list, was going to come out. And so, unfortunately, what I did was set the tone for the next couple of months there where I was an overworked service desk. People would send me requests. I would rush to work on them. A lot of times I would try to do it like in the order that requests were received, but there were lots of people who would basically have their finger hovering over the button to publish something and say, hey, could you work on this? Oh, by the way, it really needs to go out soon. The news just broke. But whenever you can get it done. And so, of course, you've got to reshuffle the deck and really rush to get a chart done. And The problem with that was like I was more often than not growling at my coworkers when they would come near my desk. I was kind of dodging them, trying to make sure that they didn't see me and then get an idea for something else to add to my to-do list. I was basically running out of RAM. I would come in and just work on things that were last-minute requests all day, and then go home and then hope that I could get enough sleep to come in and do it again the next day. So I pretty quickly realized that I was going to have to put in their hands some kind of tool that was going to allow them to make their own charts. And I was going to have to get them data literate, at least data literate enough to stop sending me PDFs, and to learn to start cleaning their own data. And so since we are where we are, and this is the conference that it is, I should say, I tried to teach them how to learn Plotly, and that was just a little too much for a lot of the reporters to handle. I'll tell a quick anecdote to kind of explain why. So when I was a kid, there was a amusement park not too far from where I grew up, and in the brochures that I had been able to get my hands on, I saw that like they would let kids my age, like 8 or 9, drive go-karts by themselves. Like there was no adult in the car with them. So I was completely stoked. I was like, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. And so we get there, and I realized that what wasn't in the brochure was the fact that it had been cropped out that there was a metal rail running around the whole track. And so that meant I wasn't gonna have complete freedom behind the wheel, and they were probably gonna have fewer lawsuits. Like, I was really pissed. And so that's basically what my colleagues needed if they were gonna start making their own charts to put in their own stories. They needed something to keep them from literally going off the rails. Because it was already a lot to ask them to learn how to analyze and clean and format and just understand what they were looking at when they had a spreadsheet open in front of them. Trying to teach them basic design principles was going to be just way too big an ask. Because some of the things that I saw when I did try to unleash them on, like, okay, you're going to make your own chart, was that I saw that they would try to overwhelm the reader. They would write really bad headlines. They would load the thing up with a bunch of notes and things like that because they hadn't built a good chart that was going to convey the message, and so they figured, well, I could just put a huge paragraph of text up in this right corner, and this will explain to people what they're looking at. Well, no, you don't want to have to ask them to do that. They have the story if they want to read. Just give them a chart that they can understand pretty quickly. And I also saw that we had some reporters that would use like 10-color palettes or like chartreuse and hot pink. Which appear nowhere on our website. And they are not on our website right now because I got rid of those charts when they did happen. And so, just scrolling down a bit. So at this point, you all are probably in the clutches of what I like to call a full-body cringe. Like, this sounds like a horrible thing, right? But things have gotten a lot better. I wouldn't be there now if things hadn't changed pretty dramatically. So the good news is that I'm now a 2-women data department. I've increased the size of my department by 100%. I've got an intern turned full-timer who's now working with me. So I've got someone who will high-five me when one of us writes a really cool piece of code or something like that. Because before, no one in the newsroom really gets it. And I'm sure there's some of you in here who understand what it is to be a lonely coder, a lonely data analyst who's working with lots of people who think what you do is really, really cool, but they don't get it. And so they don't appreciate some of the finer nuances of the kind of work that you do. And so now me and my reporter, Grace, we have the bandwidth to code. We satisfy the occasional chart request, because we do still take some of those. It's okay. I haven't totally told everyone, you're on your own, I'll never do that again for you. And we also are able to work on some bigger projects that, start with data the way it's supposed to be, and then eventually, there's some reporting and other things that flow in to really tell a cohesive story. But the thing that we start with is the data, and to me, that's wonderful. So I want to talk a little bit about how I managed to do that, because if I hadn't, I'm not sure that I would have stayed, but I'm really glad that I did. So I started in May. And then by September, I was sending out emails telling everyone, we're going to have some workshops. I'm going to teach you guys how to use a chart builder. And we were using something called Data Wrapper. It basically provided that metal rail I needed to keep people from having to make design decisions on their own. And so what I did is I asked everyone to come in. I told them we're going to go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. We're going to download some unemployment data. We're going to clean it up, because when you download that stuff, I don't know if anyone's looked at it, but it's not in the kind of shape you need it to be if you're going to actually make something with it and illustrate it. We're going to make a line chart, and then we're going to show you guys some best practices about putting a headline, a deck, how to credit things, and all of that, and then embed it in a story. So we were able to do that, and most of the people who came to this workshop got through that example no problem. They left, they were happy, they seemed to not be in too much pain when they walked out of the room. I should mention the funny thing is that this all happened when we were at the Time and Life building still. We're now downtown, not that far away. But at the Time and Life building, the only place where there's a computer lab where I could actually do something like that is in the basement at the end of a dark hallway. And so, like, I can only imagine, like, you know, if you don't know anything about, there's lots of people in the newsroom who, when they met me, they responded to, I hate math, I hate Excel, I don't like doing any of those things. And so, you know, I'm asking them, come learn how to do what I do, and they've got to walk down this dank, dark hallway to get to the room where I'm about to teach them how to do it. So, you know, the deck was really stacked. And so the problem was, because I had used BLS data, the only two reporters who were still using this chart builder about a week later were the two reporters who regularly work with that kind of data. And so what I learned from that was that I had to start tailoring some of these things and do smaller group training so that, you know, we were using data that was going to resonate with whichever reporter or team I was working with at the time. And so I got to the point where I would sit down with, say, the tech team, and we would go ahead and say, okay, we're going to pull up some data that has to do with, you know, the kinds of devices that people are using or things like that, and we're going to work on that. And so slowly the tech team started to, like, migrate into, oh, we can make charts, we could do this, this is something that's useful to us. I've got a food reporter who really didn't get it. I mean, she was very earnest, she was very nice, but it didn't really click with her until I showed her this report from the FDA. And I showed her, look, there's this big, you know, they've basically ranked the different organic foods that you're going to pay a big premium on if it's organic or not organic. This is really interesting. If you're going to write it up, it really needs a chart. You've got to do a chart with this. And so I sat down with her, and, like, for all of, you know, half an hour, I had to sit desk side with her. And then after that, she started coming to me with more ideas for, like, I want to do this with data, I want to do that with data. I've got a retail reporter, Phil Waba, who's been with us for a really long time, and when I initially told him about the different workshops I was going to be doing, he, like, almost broke down. He was like, I don't like math, I don't like Excel, I'm not generally good with technology, I'm never going to get this. You're going to have to be very patient with me. But because I was patient with him and that I brought to our little session some same-store sales numbers that we were going to work with, he's now charting circles around most of his coworkers. And so I think that's, like, a huge win, and he's, like, you know, one of my gold stars. And so that helped a lot. And so for all the other people in the newsroom who were still holdouts, who were still basically trying to avoid my gaze in meetings and things like that, and knew that they had sometimes, like, still screenshotted things, even though I had sent many memos telling them, please don't do that, please don't do that, the lawyers are going to scream. Finally, I got the social team on my side, and I said, look, you know that any tweet or Facebook post that's got a chart attached to it is going to get more likes and more retweets and just generally more attention, and is going to convert more people into folks who will click on that link and get them traffic to their stories. I need you to go to the meeting and tell everyone that. And so once they did that, I had lots of inbound requests of, can I sit down with you? Can you show me how to use that again? You know, can you brief me on how to use this chart builder again? Because, you know, I couldn't expect that everyone in the newsroom was going to want to do this just to make me happy. You know, like, of course I think everyone should want to make me happy, but that just wasn't going to fly with everyone. And so what I had to do was show them that, look, I know your editor's breathing down your back telling you that you need to get the traffic coming to your stories up. What I know how to do is a way that you can accomplish that. And so I want to say, like, maybe 90% of the newsroom now, with minimal help, can make their own charts. So, I mean, that's a big win, I think. And so I should point out that when I took this job, like, I definitely dreamt of, like, coming in and doing, like, some 538 shit. I mean, like, you know, like, I love that kind of stuff. And it was the kind of stuff that I hadn't really had the power to do at previous jobs. I loved working with data. I loved analyzing things. I thought that there should be a lot more of it in newsrooms, certainly in business journalism, which is where I'm at now. And there just wasn't. And so taking this job was a huge, you know, opportunity that I thought. You know, it's something that, like, I simply cannot get my mother to stop telling people, even if it's not relevant to whatever conversation she's having. And so I dreamed of doing, like, these huge, sexy projects the moment I landed. But the problem was that, like, I had to meet the newsroom where it was. And the fact was, no one in that newsroom was really working with data the way I wanted to work with data. And I could have tried to go it alone and just, well, everyone go away, just keep screenshotting, embedding, I will turn my eye, and I'm gonna work on these big projects that I wanna work on totally by myself, and you guys go ahead. But the good news is that now, like a year and a half later, I'm at a point where most of the people I work with have some degree of data literacy. They come to me with ideas, and I can leverage all of the beat-specific knowledge that they have to make everything that I'm gonna do better. And so at this point, like, we were able to build a federal income tax calculator that we put out right before the election, although unfortunately not before a nicer one got published. So that was me and Grace's big, oh no moment the day that we were getting ready to publish that someone else put one up. We are also able to collect and fact check many, many times over the names and details for a bunch of fraternity brothers and sorority sisters who had started their own companies. We've got a venture, it's the small business team. We've got a small business team that decided they wanted to see if there was any kind of like tie or correlation between like being in Greek life and then going on to start your own business. And so now we've got like, I think, north of 500 people that we put into that database, and that didn't exist anywhere, unfortunately, before we started that project. But luckily, the people who worked on it came to me a few months ahead of time, and so we basically underwent this months-long data collection process where we were just plain trying to reach out to people, trying to get information, and then we had to go through the process of making everything very uniform so that we could actually put it in a table and know that someone could sort it and understand everything that was there. And not have spelling mistakes. And the good news is that there's also a submission form, so every time there's a sorority brother or fraternity sister who says, hey, me too, you forgot me, there's like a nice, neat spreadsheet that all that stuff could be funneled into to make our updating process a lot easier. And we were also able to take the Fortune 500, which, the couple weeks after I started just had like a few static charts that went out with some stories, and really that was it. And during my interview process, I kind of think that's maybe what made me stand out. Like, I asked them, like, what do you do besides put out this list with the Fortune 500? And their answer was, well, that's kind of it. We write a few stories around it. We write about, here's the tech companies that are on the Fortune 500 this year, and honestly, that list doesn't change very much. So that's not a terribly engaging story all the time. And I think I might have cursed during the interview when they told me that's all they did with it. And I said, you've got to do more. And so like those few weeks right after I started wasn't enough time to do more. But I'm happy to say that this year when the Fortune 500 launched, that we had an interactive map and charts, and like every one of the profile pages now has a chart in it. And so like we've done more to kind of like bring something more visual to everything that we're doing. And so it's moving in the right direction. And I'm not doing the huge, sexy projects that I wanted to do. I didn't get to start doing that when I first got there, but I'm happy that it happened this way because it means that like now I'm able to leverage the power of most of the newsroom to help me do those big projects. And so now there's lots of stuff that we have that I'm really excited about. I've got the technology team is working on building this database that I can use so that updating all of our lists is going to be a lot easier. The video team wants to put charts and things, and so I've brought like the gospel of data to Fortune and largely made a lot of changes, and I'm happy to say like it's a better and more data-driven place to work now. And so, see, we got about 10 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah?
What do you think, so you think eventually you want to do like the reaction, right?
Yeah.
How do you see provided where you're now? What is missing? It's like the background of people. I mean, how do you? What has to change in addition to what you're doing? Different way of hiring people, doing more training. What is your plan to get there, basically?
I think where we're hurting right now is we don't have enough developers who are in the newsroom. Like we've got developers and engineers, obviously, who are working on the site itself, but we don't have enough developers who are like in the newsroom. So like I know how to code, at least enough to have worked on some of the projects that I've worked on. My reporter knows how to code, but we really need more people who are going to bring a little bit more of that to the table, because it's one thing to do more of that data-driven reporting, but like what we've noticed is that we have some big things that we've tried to unleash, and like the website just isn't really set up to make them look as special as they really are. I don't know if some of you have seen some of like the full bleed spreads that Bloomberg Business Week will do for some of their really big projects. Like as soon as you land on that page, it's special, a lot of work has gone into it. So the production and we need a little more coding knowledge, I think. And we're getting there. It seems like the engineering team has told me a couple times, like I've pestered the hell out of them, but they've told me a couple times that they're going to make more people available to me so that when I need to pull them for a project and they say, like, you're going to work with me, here's what we're working on, let's meet with this reporter, we can do that.
Hi.
Yeah.
How do you think a good way to leverage what we're showing outside the companies to use inside and internal meetings to create them to be interactive instead of static reports and PowerPoint
So
slides?
you're asking how I get them to come to me before they start a project, not after?
No,
I'm
no.
sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
Yeah. Asking when we're doing internal meetings, usually that comes out of PowerPoint, some static report of something interactive we did. How do you think we can bridge that and have those internal meetings be interactive?
I think, so you're asking how we can get information that's like in a PowerPoint or a report or something like that into a state that's ready to turn into an interactive? Am I hearing you right?
Instead of when it shows up in the meeting static, so they say, what about if we do this? So it was interactive, you could do it on the fly in the meetings with the presentation.
Okay. I'm sorry, the AC is a little loud. I think I got you. You're asking how you can make meetings more interactive? I mean, like when I've done meetings where I need to explain things to people, like I'll kind of have them like, okay, you're going to walk through me with building this chart, and we're going to talk about what I'm doing at each one of these breakpoints. You know, why am I choosing this headline? Why am I choosing this chart format? I've all but like outlawed pie charts because I just don't like them. And I'll also do things where like, I mostly do this, like when I'm choosing the bad examples, I'll try to choose ones from people who are no longer with the company, so I'm not talking shit on anyone in the room. But, you know, I'll pull up examples and say, okay, here's a chart. And now without me saying anything, tell me about what's good and what's not good about this chart. And I'll try to kind of steer the conversation. But I've realized what doesn't work is me just standing up there and just like going on a rant about why everyone needs to learn this. And you know, believe me, like there's tons of inner monologue, you know, that I go through during the day thinking like everyone needs to learn this, is going to change the course of their career, this is really life-changing for them. But, you know, they just don't want to be talked at. I've found that a lot of reporters want to feel like they're part of the conversation, and it also kind of helps to teach them that like you've already got some of the skills that you need to do this. Like when I involve them, they understand that, oh, I can tell the difference between a good chart and a bad chart. And I can tell the difference between like this is an effective way to show this, this is not an effective way to show this. So, and it also kind of puts them in a position to turn around and teach other people. So when I deputize some of the people like who were at the meeting and say, okay, now go out and spread this, they feel a lot more confident about what they've just learned. And it kind of helps reinforce everything. Yeah?
Have you ever worked to establish brand guidelines within the font selections, colors, choices, that kind of thing within the whole organization?
Yes, they're not always adhered to, but it's better than it used to be. So I'm the one who's working on the website of things, and we've got someone who works with the magazine. And it used to be that we had completely different style guides, which in some cases, like it works. There's like little flourishes and like adornments and things like that that work just fine on a print page, but like it just looks like busy, loud noise on the web. You know, you don't want to use any of that. Minimalism, I think, is better on the web. And so we're at least now using the same kind of colors, we're using the same fonts on the web, and I found that that works a little better. It just helps the whole thing look a little more cohesive. I'm not sure, did I answer your question? Yeah. So yeah, we're in the middle of working on that now. Any others? Yes.
Generated. So are you maintaining some kind of metadata or data dictionary on data that you have?
We're working on that. So I've got the engineers. I thankfully now have someone who's in charge of the engineers who's totally on board. Like I got to him right when he started and I kind of like did my little spiel. And he's like, yeah, we should totally build something so that you can house all of your data. And so we're working on automating the collection of a lot of stuff that we regularly lose. I mean, you think about it, Fortune, like obviously we're looking at stocks all day. We're looking at earnings reports all day. And we're also looking at a lot of the government data that comes out having to do with markets and unemployment and job openings and turnover and stuff like that. And so thankfully, a lot of that stuff is quantifiable, and it's already in row and column format. So we're getting there. Mostly now, like the dictionary and like the way that we house everything that's already been done that we could maybe use again is with Dropbox and me and my reporter. But I mean, going forward, obviously that's not like a sustainable system. So we're getting there. Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Anyone else? Yes? Yeah, so we wound up doing focus groups before we launched this year's Fortune 500, and I'm pretty sure that the reason that they were really dogged about making sure I went to all of the meetings planning for the Fortune 500 was because it turns out all of the data they collected from them, the survey data, showed that all of these people wanted to see more of what's on the list visualized in a way that wasn't just paragraphs of text or tables. You know, like we used to have one little stock chart that was kind of like off to the right on all of the profile pages, and it wasn't even really in the same style as the rest of the site. And so we discovered, like much to our dismay, that most people thought it was just an ad off on the side of the page. You know, like, and that was heartbreaking for the people who built that thing. So yeah, like we know definitely that people want to see more of that, and so that's another reason why like I've had some success getting people to swallow this pill where I'm telling them you've got to do more work, you've got to put in a little more time. But the good thing is that like I've said no to enough last minute requests at this point that people will come to me before they get started on something, because if they promise their editor a chart and I just turn around and tell them, sorry, you can't have it because I'm not doing this in 5 minutes, next time they do things a little differently. And I should just say this. None of what I said about the newsroom and the culture is to disparage any of the folks I work with. Like, they're great. They're very brilliant. They have really deep, like, beat-specific knowledge about some of the things that they cover. They've been doing this for years. Like, the hardest part was just getting them to speak my language so that we could work on projects together and make sure that whatever was being done visually also matched up with the text that was on the page. So no one tell my coworkers that I was talking shit on them. I think we're almost done. One more, yeah. So before I came to Fortune, I was at Bankrate, which is they've been around since the 90s. It's kind of like a niche personal finance site. I was a data reporter there. I liked it in that I got to work with data more often, but the problem was like I was kind of like detached from everything that had to do with like really creating what the reader was going to see. Like I basically had to just send spreadsheets off to someone who was going to do the rest of it, and I wouldn't see it until it was actually in the article and published. And so that's kind of what got me fired up and like kind of gave me like a good story to tell when I went into the interviews for Fortune. I said, I don't want things to be like that. I want everything to be a little more cohesive and more team-based. And before that, I was working at the Star Ledger in Newark as a small business reporter. All right, am I done? Thanks.